Young millionaire married a homeless girl to dodge tradition, never knowing she hid a legacy. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's return to our main character. The night wind swept across the rooftop of the Ward Hotel, a sharp, late autumn gust that rattled the metal railings and carried the faint hum of the city below. Neon lights reflected off the wet pavement 30 floors down, but up here it felt strangely quiet, as if the whole world were holding its breath. Elias Ward stood beneath the dim amber glow of a rooftop lamp. The collar of his charcoal coat pulled tight around his neck, his jaw locked in a tension he'd been carrying for months. Against the cold concrete wall sat a young woman in a torn backpack and a faded sweatshirt, hugging her knees like someone trying to disappear into herself. Her name, he learned just moments ago, was Lena, and she was homeless. She looked up at him now with eyes that were both cautious and stubbornly alive, the kind of eyes that had clearly learned how to survive every kind of disappointment. Elias swallowed, feeling the weight of his family's threat echoing in the back of his skull. Marry by the end of the month or lose the company. He didn't love anyone. He didn't even have the time to pretend. But he had an idea, dangerous, desperate, unthinkable. Still, it was the only idea that made sense. A single raindrop hit the roof, then another, then a soft scatter like fingertips drumming on metal. He stepped closer, stopping a few feet from her, his breath visible in the cold air. "Lena," he said, his voice low but steady, "I need something. Something unusual, and I can make it worth your while." She blinked slowly, suspicion flickering over her face. People don't say stuff like that unless trouble's coming. Elias let out a short breath. She was sharper than he expected. He reached into his coat and pulled out a small leather folder. Thin, elegant, and terrifying in its simplicity. A marriage contract. Her eyes widened, and he saw her shoulders tense like she might bolt. "I'm not trying to trap you," he said quickly. "Just hear me out. I need a temporary wife. 3 months. No romance. No expectations. No strings after that. You'll have housing, medical coverage, a stipend, and I'll help you get back on your feet." Lena stared at him, confused, almost offended. "Why me? You could hire some model or actress or anyone else who actually belongs in your world." Elias hesitated. In the city glow, she could finally see a trace of exhaustion beneath his polished exterior. "Because," he said quietly, "everyone in my world wants something from me. You're the first person tonight who didn't try to impress me, deceive me, or charm me. You just told me to move off your cardboard mat because it wasn't community property. You were honest, direct, and I need someone who doesn't care about my last name." Rain slipped down her temple. She wiped it with the back of her hand, eyes narrowing. "So what? You want me to pretend to be your wife so you can keep your fancy office?" "Yes," he replied without flinching. "So I can keep my company and escape a marriage arrangement my family is forcing on me." Silence stretched between them, broken only by the patter of rain and the distant wail of a siren far below. Lena looked at the contract, then back at him. Her heartbeat thudded in her ears. She had nothing, no steady food, no shelter, no safety. Her sister was sick miles away, waiting for help that never came. And this stranger was offering, not salvation, but a chance. A temporary life raft. 3 months, she whispered. No touching. No sleeping in the same room. No controlling my choices. Done, Elias said instantly. He didn't even blink. Another gust rolled across the rooftop, scattering droplets around them like shards of glass. Lena slowly reached for the contract, her fingers trembling, not from fear, but from the terrifying possibility that this might be the first break she'd had in years. And as her hand hovered just above the folder, Elias spoke again, softer, almost human for the first time. "I'm not the danger in your life, Lena. I promise you that." She didn't know it yet, but the real danger was the secret she had been hiding her entire life. A secret even she didn't fully understand. And it was about to collide with his world in a way neither of them could imagine. I hope you are still here with me, because part 2 continues right where we left off. Now let us return to our main character. The rain thickened over the rooftop, turning the concrete slick as Elias watched Lena, holding that marriage contract like it might burn her fingers. Her breathing was shaky, uneven, the kind of breath someone takes when they are trying to convince themselves that hope is not a trap. She finally tucked the folder to her chest and whispered, 3 months, and you keep every promise you made. Elias nodded once, firm, almost relieved. I will. That was the moment everything shifted, even if neither of them understood how deeply. Within 1 hour, Lena was sitting inside Elias's black sedan, wrapped in a clean wool blanket the driver always kept for emergencies. She had not been inside a car like this before. The leather was soft, the windows tinted, the quiet almost unnatural compared to the constant noise of the streets she slept on. She kept her hands folded in her lap, her fingers still trembling. Elias sat beside her in the back seat, watching the city lights smear across the glass as they drove toward his penthouse for the temporary stay that the contract required. He glanced at her. If at any point you want out, you tell me. Lena gave a small nod. And if at any point you start acting like you own me, I will leave before you finish your sentence. A small smile tugged at the corner of Elias's mouth. Direct, unfiltered. He admired that. When the sedan entered the private garage beneath his building, Lena exhaled sharply. The space looked less like a garage and more like a museum of cars and polished floors. She whispered, I do not belong here. Elias replied, neither do I, most days. In the elevator, as they rose floor after floor, Lena watched the digital numbers climb. She tried not to stare at the faint reflection of herself in the mirrored doors. Her sweatshirt was damp, her hair messy from the wind, and she felt painfully out of place beside a man who looked like he walked out of a magazine. When the doors slid open, the penthouse took her breath. Floor-to-ceiling windows. A view of the city stretching for miles. Warm light reflecting off clean marble. It was too much. She stepped back instinctively. Elias, I cannot stay here. I cannot even touch anything in this place. Elias placed his coat on the armchair and turned to her gently. You are not here to impress anyone. You are here because we made an agreement, and I will honor it. Before Lena could protest, a woman in her 40s appeared from the hallway. Short hair, crisp uniform, calm expression. Welcome home, Mr. Ward. I see we have a guest. Elias nodded. Caroline, this is Lena. She is staying with us. Caroline's eyes softened immediately. Lena braced herself for the usual judgment, but instead Caroline said with genuine warmth, let me get you a dry set of clothes and something warm to drink. You must be freezing. Lena blinked, caught off guard. It had been a long time since a stranger spoke to her that kindly. Minutes later, dressed in a simple but clean sweater and sweatpants, Lena walked into the living room holding a steaming mug of chamomile tea. She sat on the edge of the sofa, small and tense, while Elias reviewed the digital version of the contract on his tablet. He approached her, offering the stylus. Sign whenever you are ready. I will sign after you. She hesitated. And after I sign this, I am your wife on paper. Yes, he answered. But you are still your own person. Nothing in this contract takes that from you. She looked at him for a long moment, trying to decode the man behind the billionaire reputation. Then she placed her name on the screen with careful strokes. Lena Hale. When Elias signed his name beneath hers, the agreement became real. Final. Binding. She set the stylus down and whispered, so what now? Elias closed the tablet and sat across from her. Now, you get rest. A real bed. A hot shower. Food. And tomorrow, we begin preparing for the first appearance. Lena sighed, unsure whether to laugh or cry. I cannot believe I just married a stranger. Elias looked at her with a gentleness she did not expect. You married a man who owes you honesty, and I intend to pay that debt. Outside the window, the city glowed like a sea of stars. Unaware that two lives had just collided in a way that neither contract nor logic could fully contain. And somewhere deep inside Lena, a truth she thought she had buried began to stir. Now let us return to our main character. Morning sunlight spilled through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the penthouse, bathing the living room in a warm, golden glow that Lena had never woken up to before. She sat on the edge of the guest bedroom mattress, still wrapped in the softness of a comforter that felt too luxurious to be real. For a moment she forgot where she was, until the events of last night rushed back. The contract, the signatures, the fact that she was now legally tied to Elias Ward. even if only on paper. A gentle knock sounded on the door. Caroline peeked inside with a smile. "Good morning, Lena. I have breakfast ready. And Mr. Ward asked me to remind you that he will explain today's schedule over coffee." Lena swallowed nervously but followed her to the dining area. The table was laid with scrambled eggs, toast, fresh fruit, and a cup of coffee that smelled like heaven. She hesitated to sit, unsure which chair was appropriate, but Caroline nudged her lightly. "Anywhere you like. This is your home for now." That sentence sent a strange, uncertain warmth through Lena's chest. Before she could process it, Elias walked in wearing a crisp white shirt and charcoal slacks, hair neatly styled, still drying slightly from the shower. When he saw her, he paused, studying her for a brief moment. "You slept well, I hope?" Lena nodded slowly. "Better than I have in a long time." Elias sat across from her and set his tablet aside. "We have our first appearance today. A private family brunch at my grandmother's estate. Nothing too large, but they will expect us to behave like a married couple." Lena stiffened. "I do not know how to act like a rich man's wife." Elias shook his head. "You do not need to act like one. You just need to act like yourself. But there are a few things we should go over." For the next hour, he guided her through the basics. How to greet family members, the expected polite phrases, what to do if someone tried to corner her with invasive questions. His tone stayed steady, calm, respectful, as if he were teaching a friend rather than a woman he had plucked from the edge of homelessness. When she practiced saying, "It is lovely to meet you," her voice wavered, and Elias gave a small smile. No one expects perfection. They expect confidence. And you have more of that than you think. Something about his certainty made her shoulders ease. Later, in the walk-in closet, Lena tried on one of the dresses Caroline prepared. A soft beige midi dress with long sleeves that draped like breath. She stared at herself in the mirror, almost not recognizing the woman staring back. "Do I look ridiculous?" she whispered. Caroline shook her head firmly. "You look like someone who deserves to be seen." That sentence struck harder than Lena expected. She blinked away the sting in her eyes and followed Elias to the car downstairs. During the drive to the estate, Lena felt every mile tighten her chest. Mansions lined the hilltop road, each one grander than the last. When their sedan pulled through the iron gates of the Ward estate, the grounds opened like something out of a magazine. Fountains, trimmed hedges, elegant stone paths. Lena's hands grew cold. "Elias, your family will know I am not one of them." Elias let out a slow breath. "They will know, but they will also know you are my wife." His emphasis on that last word made her heart beat faster with something she could not name. Inside the mansion, the scent of polished wood and fresh flowers filled the air. Dozens of relatives gathered in small clusters, dressed in tailored clothing, sipping morning champagne. Conversations hushed the moment Elias and Lena entered. Lena felt dozens of eyes sweep over her, assessing, judging, weighing her existence. Pressure pushed against her ribs. But Elias stepped closer, placing a warm hand on her lower back, guiding her forward gently. It was the first physical contact between them, and though it was subtle, it anchored her like a lifeline. He leaned in just enough for her to hear. "Breathe. I am right here." Then came the voice that cut the room in half. Elias. His grandmother, Margot Ward, stood near the marble staircase, elegant in a navy dress, diamonds at her ears, posture straight as a ruler. Her gaze slid to Lena, cool and sharp. "And this must be your wife." Lena lifted her chin slightly, remembering Elias's training. "It is lovely to meet you, Mrs. Ward." A thin smile touched Margot's lips, but her eyes did not soften. "We shall see." The room shifted again, tension gathering like a storm. Lena realized this was only the beginning of the test she had unknowingly stepped into. And Elias, sensing her fear, moved just a fraction closer, enough to shield her from the weight of every stare. She whispered under her breath, "What have I gotten myself into?" Elias answered quietly, "Something temporary, that may become more complicated than either of us planned." And with that, the brunch began, and the battle lines were drawn. Now let us return to our main character. The brunch unfolded like a silent battlefield, every smile sharpened, every glance dipped in suspicion. Lena kept her hands clasped together under the table, grounding herself as she listened to polished conversations swirl around her like a language she had never been taught. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light across the dining room. but nothing about the atmosphere felt warm. Margot Ward sat at the head of the table, watching Lena with the precise focus of someone examining a forged painting. Elias maintained a calm composure beside his new wife, answering questions about business expansions, upcoming projects, and charity galas. Yet every so often, he nudged his knee gently against Lena's under the table, a subtle reminder that she was not alone. When Margot finally addressed her directly, the entire room quieted. "So, Lena," she said, slicing into her poached pear with delicate precision, "Elias tells us very little about where you two met. I assume it was unconventional." Lena swallowed, her throat tightening. She had prepared for this, but being under Margot's direct scrutiny was more intense than anything Elias had warned her about. "We met one evening by chance," Lena said softly. "It was unexpected, but sometimes unexpected things bring out the best in people." A few relatives exchanged looks, some amused, some disbelieving. Margot tilted her head. "And what does your family think of this marriage?" The question hit her like a cold splash of water. Lena lowered her eyes. "I do not really have family who can give an opinion." The table fell into a moment of uncomfortable silence. Margot's eyebrow lifted. "How convenient." Elias's jaw flexed. "Grandmother," he said sharply, "Lena is my wife. Her past is not for you to dissect." Margot ignored him, still studying Lena as if searching for cracks. "Everyone has a past, my dear. The question is what one might be hiding behind it." Before Elias could respond, a male cousin at the far end of the table chuckled. "I suppose love happens in strange places. What were you doing when Elias met you, Lena?" Lena froze. She thought of the cold pavement, the cardboard mat, the cheap blanket she had wrapped around herself while the world passed her by without a second glance. She could not tell them the truth. They would devour her. She began slowly, trying to stay warm. Another cousin whispered loudly to his sister, "That explains the dress." And they both laughed until Elias shot them a glare sharp enough to cut glass. But it was Margot who rose next, resting her napkin gently on the table. "If you will excuse me," she said in a tone colder than the marble floors, "I need a moment." She walked away, her heels clicking in a rhythm that made Lena's stomach twist. After a few interrupted conversations, the meal dissolved into small groups mingling in the hallway. Lena stepped aside, overwhelmed, leaning against a pillar to breathe. Elias approached her slowly. "You handled yourself well." She gave him a small, wry smile. "Are you sure about that?" "It felt like I was being inspected for defects." "You were," Elias said honestly. "But that does not mean you failed." Before she could answer, Margot's voice echoed from behind them. "Elias, a word." He looked at Lena apologetically. "I will be right back." As Elias followed his grandmother into the study, Lena's heartbeat hammered. She paced near the window, watching manicured gardens sway in the breeze. She could not hear the conversation through the wooden door, but she could imagine, and she was not far off. Inside the study, Margot stood by the fireplace, arms crossed tightly. "You bring a stranger into this family with no background, no pedigree, and expect us to smile." Elias kept his voice level. "I expect you to respect my choice." Margot's eyes hardened. "This marriage is a mistake, a threat to the Ward name, and I assure you, I will uncover whatever she is hiding." Elias stepped closer, lowering his tone. "She is hiding nothing dangerous. And even if she were, it is not your place to tear her apart." Margot leaned forward. "If she hurts this family, even by accident, I will end this arrangement myself." Meanwhile, outside the room, Lena stood still as a stone when Margot emerged minutes later. The older woman offered a polite but icy smile. "I look forward to knowing you better, my dear." The words felt like a warning. As Margot walked away, Elias returned to Lena's side. His expression softened when he saw the fear in her eyes. "Do not listen to her," he said quietly. "She is testing us. That is all." Lena nodded, but her chest was tight. "Elias, I am not sure I can do this." "You can," he said, voice steady and reassuring. "I will help you through it." She wanted to believe him, but as she glanced toward the study door Margot had disappeared through, Lena felt the first crack of doubt forming. This was more than a contract, more than pretending. This was stepping into a world that would try to break her, piece by piece. And she had no idea that her past, her real past, was already on its way back, ready to shatter everything they thought they understood. Now let us return to our main character. The car ride back from the Ward estate was quiet, but not the peaceful kind. It was the kind of silence that pressed against the chest, heavy and sharp. Lena kept her eyes fixed on the city passing by outside the window. Each skyscraper melted into the next like a watercolor blur, but nothing calmed the twisting in her stomach. She replayed the brunch over and over, every glance, every judgment, every subtle jab from Margot Ward. Elias watched her from the other side of the back seat, noticing the way her fingers gripped the fabric of her dress until her knuckles turned white. "You did well," he said finally, his voice steady. "You handled their questions better than most people would." She gave a faint shake of her head. "It felt like drowning with my eyes open." Elias leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "Lena, listen to me. They do not get to decide your worth." She looked at him then, really looked, searching for any hint of pity or condescension. But all she found was sincerity, which somehow frightened her more. "Why are you being kind to me?" she whispered. He blinked. "Because kindness is the bare minimum I owe you." The sedan pulled into the private garage, and the two of them stepped out. Inside the penthouse, Caroline had prepared tea and soft lighting, sensing the emotional weight they carried. Lena sank into the couch while Elias removed his jacket and loosened the collar of his shirt. He sat across from her, studying her expression. "There is more I need to tell you about my grandmother," he began. "But first, I want to hear what you are thinking." Lena exhaled slowly. "I am thinking your family hates me. And they might be right too. I am a nobody, Elias. A woman you pulled from a cold sidewalk because you needed a wife on paper. I have nothing to offer them." He shook his head immediately. "That is not true. You have dignity, strength, honesty, things I would choose over wealth any day." She let out a humorless laugh. "You say that because you already have money. People like me do not get the luxury of choosing ideals over survival." "I know," Elias admitted softly, "which is why I want to make this easier for you." He reached into a drawer and pulled out a small velvet box. Lena stiffened. "What is that?" "Wedding rings," he said calmly. "Symbolic ones. Nothing extravagant. Just something to make the story look real." He opened the box, revealing 2 simple silver bands. Nothing flashy, nothing gold-plated, nothing designed to broadcast wealth. Just honest metal. Lena stared at them in silence. "I have never worn a ring before," she murmured. Elias took the smaller band and approached her slowly. "May I?" She held out her hand before she could overthink it. The cool metal slid onto her finger, fitting perfectly. She felt a strange weight settle over her, both grounding and frightening. "Your turn," Elias said quietly, offering her the larger band. Lena hesitated, then took his hand. His skin was warm, steady, familiar in a way she could not explain. She slid the ring onto his finger, her breath catching when their eyes met. For a moment, the world felt strangely still. But reality returned quickly when Elias stepped back, clearing his throat. "We should also prepare you for the next event. My grandmother will not stop at brunch. She will push harder." Lena sighed. "I figured." Elias paced for a moment, thinking. "There is a charity gallery next week. Cameras, donors, family, business partners. It will be public, which means the scrutiny will be intense." She winced. "Great. But you will not be facing it alone," he said firmly. "I will stay by your side the entire night." She gave him a small, tired smile. "I appreciate that. I am just afraid." Elias sat next to her now, leaving only a few inches between them. "Fear does not make you weak. It makes you human. And you are allowed to be human, even in this world." Lena looked down at her hands, the silver ring catching the warm lamplight. "Do you ever get tired of pretending, Elias?" He let out a long, quiet breath. "Every day." Their voices faded into a softer silence, one less suffocating than before. For the first time since entering his world, Lena felt something unfamiliar blooming in her chest. Trust, fragile but present, like the faint warmth of dawn after a long winter night. She did not know it yet, but the charity gallery would not just test their partnership. It would reveal cracks, draw them closer, and bring forward a past she thought she had buried forever. And the Ward family had only begun their investigation. Now let us return to our main character. The week leading up to the charity gallery passed in a blur of preparation, tension, and unexpected moments of quiet understanding between Elias and Lena. Caroline coached Lena through posture and pacing. Elias reviewed event details with her each evening. and the penthouse slowly transformed from a stranger's home into something that felt almost safe. On the evening of the gallery, Lena stood in front of the penthouse mirror wearing a midnight blue dress Caroline had chosen. It was elegant but simple, draping gently along her frame and allowing her to move freely. No sequins, no jewels, nothing that would make her feel like she was wearing someone else's life. Elias stepped into the room, fastening the cuff of his suit sleeve. When he saw her, he paused, not because she looked glamorous, but because she looked like herself. "You look grounded," he said, catching himself before the compliment turned too personal. She smiled nervously. "Grounded is a good start, right?" "A perfect start," he replied. When they arrived at the gallery, the room was already buzzing with photographers, donors, and patrons dressed in designer evening wear. Soft music floated through the air, blending with the murmur of refined conversation. Lena's pulse quickened as cameras started turning their direction. Elias leaned in slightly and whispered, "Stay close to me. You do not need to talk to anyone you do not want to." She nodded, grateful for the reassurance. They moved through the gallery together, their steps synchronized, their presence drawing curious eyes. People paused mid-conversation, eyebrows lifting as they took in the unfamiliar woman at Elias Ward's side. Some smiled politely, others whispered behind champagne flutes. Lena held her chin a little higher and let the silver wedding band on her finger remind her she had a place beside him tonight, even if only by contract. The first challenge came sooner than expected. A woman with perfectly styled hair and diamonds large enough to blind someone approached, her voice dripping with sweetness. "Elias, darling, you never told us you got married." Her eyes flicked to Lena with barely disguised disbelief. "And who might this be?" Elias placed a steady arm around Lena's waist, his touch warm and protective. "This is my wife, Lena Ward." The woman blinked. "Wife? My goodness. That was fast. We thought you would marry someone from the board, or perhaps a senator's daughter." Lena felt heat rise in her cheeks, but before she could speak, Elias replied calmly, "I married the person I chose. That is all that matters." Another donor joined in, inspecting Lena like a museum exhibit. "Such an unconventional pairing. Where did you two meet?" Lena inhaled slowly, remembering her training. "It was unexpected," she said evenly. "But sometimes the unexpected path is the right one." They exchanged doubtful looks, but Elias tightened his arm around her subtly, reminding her she was not standing alone. For a moment, Lena felt brave. But across the room, something froze her in place. Margot Ward had arrived. The older woman wore a gown that commanded respect, her expression sharp and calculating. She moved like a queen surveying her kingdom, and every part of her body language said she was searching for a flaw. Elias straightened. "Remember, do not engage unless she speaks to you first." Lena nodded. She tried to blend into the flow of the event, pausing in front of paintings, greeting guests with calm courtesy. But Margot's presence was like a cold shadow that never moved far. And Lena felt watched. As the evening progressed, Elias introduced Lena to several business partners. Most were polite, some genuinely kind. One older man said, "You have steady eyes, young lady. You will need that in this family." Lena thanked him quietly, unsure whether it was encouragement or a warning. Then came the man who nearly unraveled her. He stepped out from a cluster of guests near the sculpture exhibit, tall and well-dressed, carrying a leather briefcase. His eyes widened when he saw Lena. Lena's breath caught. She recognized him instantly. Jonas Hale, her mother's estranged brother. A man she had not seen since childhood. A man she thought she would never cross paths with again. He approached her slowly, controlled shock flickering across his features. "Lena," he said in a low voice meant only for her. Her heart pounded. "What are you doing here?" Jonas looked her over, disbelief sharpening his voice. "I should be asking you that. The last I heard, you vanished after your mother passed. I have been trying to find you for years." Panic surged through her. Elias noticed her sudden stiffness and stepped closer protectively. "Is everything all right?" Jonas glanced at Elias, then back at Lena. "Your wife and I are family." Elias froze. The air shifted. The gallery seemed to dim around them. Lena's voice trembled. "Elias, he is telling the truth. This is my uncle." Jonas exhaled, his tone softening. "Lena, there is something you need to know. Something about your inheritance. Your mother never told you, but you are not just anybody." A chill ran through Lena's body. Jonas looked between the two of them with urgency. You are the last living heir of the Hale estate, and the legacy you carry is bigger than you realize. Elias's expression hardened with shock, and Lena felt the fragile world she built begin to crack open beneath her feet. Now let us return to our main character. The moment Jonas Hale uttered the word heir, the sound seemed to echo inside Lena's skull, drowning out the soft music, the chatter of donors, and even the footsteps on the polished gallery floor. Elias stared at her, his expression shifting from confusion to alarm as he tried to understand what was unfolding before him. Jonas stepped closer, lowering his voice with urgency. Lena, your mother kept many things from you because she feared the Hale family. Legal battles. But you are the last living descendant of the Hale estate. The inheritance was frozen until an heir could be found. I have been searching for you for years. Lena's throat tightened, her pulse racing. That cannot be true. I grew up with nothing. I moved from shelter to shelter. If I was an heir, why did no one help me? Jonas looked pained. Your mother disappeared after your grandfather's death. She refused the inheritance and refused all contact with the family. When she died, the estate went into legal limbo until a surviving heir could be located. But you vanished before we could reach you. Elias glanced between them, his jaw tightening. Why come forward now? Why tonight? Jonas hesitated. Because I did not know she was married to you, Elias. I did not know where she was until I saw her name on the guest list. Before Lena could respond, a cold voice cut through the tension like a blade. What interesting timing. Margot Ward stepped into their circle, her eyes sharp as needles, her posture rigid and regal. A long-lost uncle appears. A hidden inheritance. A mysterious legacy. What a dramatic twist for a woman we know almost nothing about. Lena's stomach twisted with dread. Elias stepped forward protectively. Grandmother, this has nothing to do with you. Leave her alone. Margot ignored him completely. She focused solely on Jonas. And you claim she is the heir of the Hale estate? Jonas held his ground. Yes, and I have the documents to prove it. Gasps rippled through the nearby donors. Margot's lips curled in a thin, victorious smile. How convenient. The homeless girl Elias married now turns out to be wealthy. One might think this entire performance was planned. Lena's breath hitched, panic rising. I did not know any of this. I swear. Margot stepped closer, her voice low but carrying enough venom to be heard clearly. Or perhaps you married my grandson knowing exactly what you stood to gain. Perhaps you played all of us. Elias snapped. That is enough. But Margot's eyes gleamed. You should be thanking me, Elias. At least now we know who we truly invited into our family. The words stung deeper than Lena expected. Before she could gather herself, Jonas placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. Lena, we should talk privately. There is more you need to know. The room felt suddenly too small, too bright, too suffocating. Lena tried to breathe, but every stare, every whisper, every raised eyebrow slammed into her like waves. Elias, she whispered shakily, I cannot do this. She turned and hurried toward the side exit, her vision blurring. Elias immediately followed, ignoring Margot's command to stop. He caught up with Lena outside the gallery doors, where the cool night air rushed over her like a slap. Lena, wait, he called. She stopped only when she reached the edge of the courtyard, clutching the stone railing to steady herself. He approached carefully, as if afraid she might break. Talk to me, he pleaded. Please. She looked up at him, eyes wet, voice trembling. You said your family would test me, but I did not know they would tear me open. Elias, I was homeless. I was nobody. And now they think I tricked you for money I did not even know existed. Elias reached out, but she stepped back. Lena, do you believe them? She asked, her voice small but piercing. The question struck him. He shook his head instantly. No, not for a second. I know you. I know who you are. Do you? She whispered. Because I do not even know who I am anymore. Jonas appeared at the doorway, waiting respectfully but urgently. Lena, I need to show you something. It is about your mother. Lena wiped her eyes and took a breath. Elias, I need answers. I need to know if any of this is real. I cannot keep pretending when my entire life has been a lie. Elias's voice softened. Then let us find the truth. Together. But she shook her head painfully. No, not together. Not tonight. I need to face this alone. It was the first time she had told him no, and it cut deeper than she realized. Elias stood still as she walked back toward Jonas, each step pulling her farther from him. As she disappeared into the dark hallway, Elias felt something unfamiliar and terrifying tighten in his chest. For the first time since their contract began, he feared losing her. And somewhere inside the gallery, Margot Ward watched with a cold, satisfied smile, unaware that the truth she believed would destroy Lena was the very truth that would unravel the Ward family instead. Now let us return to our main character. Jonas led Lena through a quiet corridor behind the gallery, away from the noise, the lights, and the whispers that had clawed at her confidence only minutes earlier. They entered a private lounge reserved for event organizers, empty except for a dim lamp glowing in the corner. Lena wrapped her arms around herself, trying to steady her breathing. "Tell me everything," she said softly. Jonas sat across from her and opened the leather briefcase he carried. Inside were old documents, photographs, and a folded birth certificate. He spread them out slowly so she would not feel overwhelmed. "Your grandfather, Theodore Hale, was the founder of Hale Conservatory and the sole owner of the Hale Historic Properties," he explained, tapping a set of deeds. "Your mother was his only daughter. But when she married your father, the family disapproved. She cut ties and disappeared. After Theodore passed, the estate was left to her. But when she refused it, everything froze legally." Lena stared at the birth certificate with trembling fingers. Her mother's name. Her own. The words felt unreal. But if the estate went to her, why did she not use it? Why did she let us live like that? Jonas sighed. "Your mother had reasons. The family fought constantly, and she wanted to protect you from becoming a target in a brutal inheritance war. She believed disappearing would give you a chance at a normal life." Lena shook her head. "I never had a normal life." "I know," Jonas whispered. "And she was wrong about many things. But she loved you, and she wanted to shield you from the chaos." Lena felt her chest tighten painfully. For years she had thought her mother simply could not provide more. Now she learned it had been a choice. A flawed, human choice. Behind them, the door opened quietly. Elias stepped inside. His expression was filled with concern rather than anger. "Lena, I know you said you wanted to do this alone," he said gently. "But I could not leave you here without knowing you were safe." Jonas looked at both of them, then stood. "I should give you two a moment." He slipped out, leaving Lena and Elias in the soft amber glow. Lena kept her gaze on the documents. "Everything I knew about my life, it is all wrong." Elias approached slowly, giving her space. "It is not wrong," he said. "It is just incomplete. You have more history than you thought. That does not erase who you are." She exhaled shakily. "Elias, your grandmother thinks I tricked you." "My grandmother sees the world divided into people who help her and people who threaten her control," he replied. "You are not the problem in her eyes. Your independence is." Lena lifted her head, surprised by his clarity. "You do not think I planned any of this?" "Lena," he said softly, "you were sleeping on the street when I found you. If you were manipulating me for wealth, you deserve an Oscar." A tiny laugh escaped her despite her exhaustion. She sank into a chair, feeling the weight of the world pressed down. "I do not know what to do with any of this." Elias knelt in front of her, his face softening. "Let me worry about the Ward family. Let your uncle guide you through the Hale estate. You do not have to face everything alone." She shook her head. "This was supposed to be simple. 3 months. Then we go our separate ways. No ties. No secrets." "Life is not simple," Elias said. "Not yours. Not mine." Lena looked into his eyes, seeing truth she had not allowed herself to acknowledge. He cared. More than he should. More than their contract ever asked of him. "Elias," she whispered, "you should not have come after me." "I had to," he said simply. "You matter." Her breath caught in her chest. But before she could respond, hurried footsteps approached. Jonas re-entered, holding another document. "Lena," he said urgently, "there is something else. Something more serious." He handed her a legal notice. "The Ward family is already digging into your past. Someone requested sealed records from the city archives 30 minutes ago." Elias's face darkened. "My grandmother." Jonas nodded grimly. "If she uncovers the full story before we control the narrative, she could challenge Lena's legal claim to the Hale estate. Or worse, twist it into grounds to annul the marriage." Lena felt cold all over. Elias rose to his feet, jaw tightening with determination. "Then we stop her." Jonas lifted an eyebrow. "How?" Elias looked at Lena with absolute certainty. "By telling the truth. Publicly. Before she can weaponize it." Lena stepped back, startled. Elias, I cannot go public. I am not ready. I barely understand the story myself. Elias softened. You do not have to be perfect. You just have to be honest. Jonas nodded. A press conference revealing Lena's identity could protect her inheritance claim and shut down Margot Ward's influence. Lena opened her mouth, then closed it again. She was overwhelmed, terrified, unprepared. And yet, she was not alone. Elias took her hands gently. Lena, trust me. This time, let me be the one who fights for you. Her heart pounded. Something inside her cracked open, something tender and frightening. After a long moment, she whispered, then we do it. Together. Elias's jaw relaxed with relief and fierce resolve. Jonas nodded and began gathering the documents. Outside, the gallery noise faded as the night deepened. And inside that small quiet room, a new alliance formed, not bound by contract, but by choice. The choice to stand together against the storm heading their way. Now let us return to our main character. The next 48 hours unfolded like a storm gathering speed. Jonas worked tirelessly to assemble the legal proofs of Lena's lineage. Elias organized a controlled press statement with his communications team. And Lena, for the first time in her life, had to step into a spotlight she never asked for. On the morning of the announcement, the penthouse hummed with quiet tension. Lena stood near the window, watching reporters gather below on the street, their cameras pointed upward like a field of metallic eyes. She wore a simple ivory blouse and tailored pants, nothing extravagant, but her presence felt stronger than before. Elias entered the room, adjusting the cuffs of his suit. When he saw her, he softened. You ready? She let out a shaky breath. I would be lying if I said yes. Then lie, he said gently, offering his hand. Just this once. She managed a small smile and placed her hand in his. Together, they stepped into the private elevator and descended to the conference room on the ground floor, where Jonas waited. The room was filled with journalists, microphones, and live broadcasting equipment. When Lena walked in with Elias beside her, the noise instantly died down. Flashing lights softened as everyone leaned forward to hear the story they had all been chasing. Jonas stepped to the podium first. Good morning. We are here today to present the verified history of Lena Hale Ward and clarify the misinformation circulating after last night's charity event. He presented the documents, the family lineage chart, the birth certificate, and the estate records. Then it was Lena's turn. She approached the podium slowly, her heartbeat thundering in her ears. But when she looked at Elias standing just behind her, steady as a pillar, her breath steadied. My name is Lena Hale Ward, she began, voice trembling but growing stronger. I did not know about my family's inheritance. I grew up with very little, and the truth of my past was hidden from me. My marriage to Elias was not about wealth. It was an agreement made during difficult circumstances. But the person I am today is simply someone trying to understand her life, just like anyone else. A murmur spread through the room, but not unkindly. The vulnerability in her voice disarmed them. After the statement ended, reporters bombarded them with questions, but Elias handled every one with calm authority, protecting Lena from hostile undertones. When it was finally over, he guided her out of the room just as Margot Ward entered from the back hallway. Her expression was unreadable, cold but complicated. You have created quite the spectacle, Margot said. Elias stepped forward. Your attempts to destroy her privacy forced us to go public. Margot raised a brow. And you believe revealing everything to the world was wise? Lena did not look away. It was honest. That is more than anything you tried to do. Margot's eyes narrowed at the unexpected strength in Lena's voice. Do you truly think you can handle the pressure of being in this family? Lena held her gaze steadily. I survived things you will never understand. I think I can handle your disapproval. Margot blinked, taken aback. Elias placed his hand on Lena's shoulder, pride flickering in his eyes. Grandmother, you misjudged her. And that is something you will need to face. Margot looked between them, realizing the shift in power. For the first time, her voice softened just slightly. Perhaps I did. It was not an apology, but it was the closest thing she could give. Later that evening, back at the penthouse, Lena finally let out a long breath as she collapsed onto the couch. Elias sat beside her, their shoulders almost touching. You were incredible, he said quietly. You were brave. She shook her head. I was terrified. Bravery is not the absence of fear. Elias said. It is acting despite it. She turned to him, eyes soft. Elias, I do not want our marriage to be just a contract anymore. His heart skipped. Lena, she continued, voice steady but vulnerable. Everything we went through, everything you did for me, it was not pretend for me. Not anymore. He reached for her hand, his touch warm. It stopped being pretend for me the night you walked into my home. They sat there for a moment, suspended between truth and hope. Then Elias slowly reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box, not the one with the contract bands, but a different one. He opened it, revealing a delicate diamond ring that sparkled like a captured star. Lena Hale Ward, he said softly. This time, will you marry me without a contract, and only with your heart? Tears welled in her eyes, but her smile was radiant. Yes, Elias, I will. He slipped the ring onto her finger, and she leaned into him, feeling the warmth of a future that finally felt real. Days later, they held a small private ceremony on the rooftop where it all began. No contracts, no fear, no lies. Just two people who had chosen each other against all odds. Under the soft glow of city lights, Elias whispered, "This was never supposed to happen." Lena smiled, resting her forehead against his. But it did, and it is the best mistake we ever made. And with that, their story came full circle, not born from tradition or wealth, but from truth, resilience, and a love that neither of them saw coming but both chose to keep forever.